Chapter 266. The Devil You Know at the Core of It. Things were indeed rather simple. Sonny hated the Black Knight enough to do his due diligence and thus spent an incredible amount of time studying it. He was so motivated to kill the creature that had hurt him that he had even gone so far as to settle in the same old cathedral as the devil. As a result, Sonny had become a singular expert on everything having to do with the Black Knight. He knew his strengths, he knew his weaknesses, the patterns of his behavior. And most importantly, he knew what type of unnatural powers the devil possessed. Unlike nightmare creatures of lower ranks, devils had access to bizarre and harrowing powers that were akin to the aspect abilities of the awakened. That was what made them so dangerous, and that was why the fact that Sonny had learned the Black Knight's power was so vital. Unlike the Spire Messenger, whom they had to fight blind, the cohort was going to go into battle with the fallen devil fully aware of what they would face. As such, they could plan, come up with strategies, and make preparations. Knowing your enemy was half the victory. The second half was knowing yourself. The smile disappeared from Sonny's face. Leaning forward, he said, "The Black Knight is truly a living nightmare. He is as strong, fast, and indestructible as you would imagine a fallen devil to be. I've seen countless creatures fall to his sword, no matter their shape, size, rank, or class. He is just too powerful." Effie giggled. "You're not really making your case, Sonny. You know that, right?" He glanced at her and grinned. "That's not even the worst part. What really makes him an incarnation of death is not his astonishing might, but the darkness that lives in the grand hall of the cathedral and seems to obey him. When wrapped in that darkness, the Black Knight can move fast, unseen, and without making a single sound. His physical traits are vastly enhanced, turning him into an unstoppable engine of slaughter." Sonny grimaced. "What's more, any damage done to him is instantly repaired as long as he is surrounded by the darkness. Inside of it, he is basically immortal." The members of the cohort glanced at each other with dubious expressions. Only Changing Star remained indifferent. A tentative smile appeared on Sonny's face. Turning to Nephis, he said, "But that is where you come in, Neph. With your radiant light, that darkness will vanish. Your flames can strip the bastard of his greatest weapon. Without his dark power, the Black Knight is nothing more than a powerful abomination. He will be only slightly more dangerous than a demon of the same rank." Castor stared at him and said, his voice flat, "You say it as though a fallen demon is an easy enemy to face." Sonny shook his head. "No, I'm not saying that. I fully understand how hard that fight will be. In fact, I understand it better than any of you. The truth of the matter is that even with the Dawn Shard, our weapons won't be able to wound him. Not because his flesh is too tough, but because he is covered in heavy armor from head to toe. I'm not even sure that there is any flesh beneath it, to be honest. There is only one chink in his armor, and that is the visor of the helmet. The Black Knight had two burning red embers instead of eyes, so Sonny didn't even know if the bastard had a face." Kai shifted a little and said with uncertainty, "So the only way to kill him is to hit the crack of the visor. I am not sure that this is possible. On a fixed target, sure. But on a moving one, especially one that fast and deadly, I can't promise that I'll manage that." The others nodded, expressing their agreement. Sonny smiled. "Ah, yes, that would indeed be tough. Luckily, we don't have to." He paused for a moment, and then revealed the secret that had taken him a long, long time to uncover. "The truth is, the visor is a trap. It seems like a weak spot, but it's not. The real weakness of the Black Knight is not even protected by the armor." A dark expression appeared on his face. "It's his sword." Indeed, after observing the devil for months, Sonny had come to the conclusion that the secret to destroying the damned thing hid not in finding a way to pierce the bastard's armor, but in destroying his terrifying greatsword. By watching the Black Knight fight against countless nightmare creatures, Sunny had been able to notice a curious pattern. Just like the members of the cohort, the abominations who wandered into the cathedral tended to instinctively go for the eyes of its guardian. But the bastard didn't care about those attacks at all. He did, however, tend to protect his sword against most powerful blows, going so far as to receive them with his body instead of blocking or deflecting them with the obliterating black blade, as if wary of any damage being done to it. By focusing on this pattern, Sunny had confirmed that the sword was indeed the only thing that the fallen devil seemed to be reluctant to put in harm's way. It was his true weakness. Nephise tilted her head slightly and echoed his words. His sword. Sunny nodded. Yes, if we want to kill the Black Knight, we will have to destroy his greatsword. That is the only way. Effie blinked a couple of times, then glared at him in outrage. Is that what you call not being protected by the armor? Of course it's not protected by the armor, because it's even tougher than the armor, you doofus. She shook her head. How are we supposed to break a sword fit to be wielded by a fallen devil? Huh? Sunny smiled. Oh, you don't have to. In fact, I insist that you don't. You are there to help me, but no one can kill that bastard except for me. No one, you understand. So your task will be to hold that fiend off. Leave the sword to me. The huntress scoffed. That's not really an answer. If none of us is strong enough to even come close to breaking such a powerful armament, how are you going to destroy it? Sunny stared at her for a bit, then shrugged. I am not going to destroy it. Do I look like someone who can destroy it? No, I don't, and I can't. A dark grin appeared on his lips. But the Stone Saint, I am willing to bet that she can. She was able to slaughter 2 fallen beasts before even becoming his shadow. Now that Sunny's own shadow had grown strong with almost 1,000 fragments fueling it with power, there were very few things in the Dark City that the Saint couldn't destroy with its help. So yes, he was willing to bet that she would be able to break the sword of the Black Knight. In fact, he was going to bet his life on it. 2 days later, they entered the Dark City once again. Nephise was right. No one from the castle was there to ambush them. Gunlog seemed to be content letting them come to him instead, so his hunters and the dreadful hunchback were nowhere to be seen. Just as well. The cohort scaled the impregnable gray wall late in the evening and spent the night in one of its towers, almost like how Sunny, Neph, and Cassie had done all that time ago. When the morning came, they headed toward the ruined cathedral. The ruined streets of the cursed city surrounded them once more. After months spent in the labyrinth, their monotone colors seemed strange and bizarre. There was nothing but dark stone and dust around, with rare islands of crimson leaves and moss growing through the rubble. And swarms of terrifying fallen creatures, of course. It was nice to be home. Sunny caught himself thinking that and blinked. He had never thought that one day he would feel sentimental about returning to this cursed, ancient prison. And yet, there was a strange feeling of comfort deep in his heart now. It had been there ever since they had crested the city wall. What weird creatures we humans are. Truly, there is nothing we can't get used to. Glancing at his companions, he noticed that they were feeling the same way, especially Effie, who had spent years surviving, hunting, and even thriving on the streets of the Dark City. She even called it a paradise once. The only kind that humans deserved. Sunny sighed. Regardless of the strange ideas the huntress had, he believed that humans weren't meant to live in a paradise. If they were to ever find one, they would quickly turn it into hell. Just like what the humans trapped on the Forgotten Shore were doing right now. Soon, the ruins of the magnificent cathedral were in front of them. The members of the cohort stopped some distance away, looking at the ancient temple with dark expressions. The journey through the Dark City had turned out to be uneventful thanks to Effie's masterful guidance and the Shadow scouting ahead to help her learn of any dangers ahead of time. But the real danger hid at the end of the path, and now they had reached it. Sonny had spent the last 2 days teaching the rest of the group everything that he knew about how the Black Devil fought, what his habits were, and how they had to approach the upcoming battle. They were as ready as they were ever going to be. Turning to them, he lingered for a few moments and then said, "Remember, I must be the one to deal the final blow. It is very important to me." Looking at him with a complicated expression, Kai sighed. "Why are you so obsessed with killing this devil, Sonny? Won't it be better to leave that creature be? I just don't understand this whole endeavor." Sonny smiled. "Have you ever been gutted, Kai? And I don't mean emotionally. I mean literally with a sharp piece of metal." The charming archer shivered. "No, were you?" The smile disappeared from Sonny's face. "Yes, I was. That bastard over there cut me open with his big sharp sword and left me bleeding to death in a ditch. So, it's only fair that I do something similar to him, is it not? I don't know how it works with you citizen folks, but out in the outskirts, you don't let things like that go. Simple as that. The day you let a person who hurt you walk free was the day you announced to the world that anyone could stomp on you with impunity. After that, it was a short road to the grave, or worse. So people in the outskirts were very serious about their grudges. Granted, the Black Knight was not really a person, but the same principle applied." Kai stared at him with a complicated expression, then asked in a strange voice, "Really? Then how did you survive?" Sonny turned away and moved his shoulders slightly. "A combination of good attributes and powerful memories. That's how I survived. Well, most of me did." With that, he shook his head and gritted his teeth in anger. "Enough talk. You all know the plan, so let's get it over with." Today, Sonny was going to reach the pinnacle of his hunter career. He was going to hunt the devil. Inside the tenebrous grand hall of the majestic cathedral, darkness reigned unopposed. It drowned the vast hall, clinging to its walls and tall columns. The rare beams of light falling through the narrow windows only served to make it seem deeper. 6 humans entered the temple, the light of their lantern memories failing to pierce the veil of darkness even slightly. For a moment there was utter silence, and then a sudden yell broke it apart. "Now!" A tall young woman with silver hair and calm, striking gray eyes raised her sword. Then, a wave of brilliant white light shone from it, reaching far and wide. The darkness was instantly torn apart and obliterated, vanishing into the deepest, darkest corners of the cathedral. And there, right in front of them, a giant clad in black steel armor was revealed, his sword already on its way to reap the lives of the unfortunate fools who had dared to desecrate the silence of the ancient temple. The great sword he wielded seemed as heavy as the stone pillars that supported the roof of the temple. Falling from above, it looked like a vertical tier in reality that revealed the impenetrable darkness hiding beneath. What could stop such a monstrous blow? Perhaps the shield that contained the weight of the heavens themselves could. Effie dashed forward, raising the dusk shard. The heavy shield received the terrible impact of the devil's unstoppable attack. A deafening sound of steel clashing against steel rolled across the grand hall like a sound shockwave, growing louder as it reflected from the stone walls. The shield held. The floor beneath Effie's feet, however, did not. It cracked and shattered, sending the huntress reeling back. A pained yelp escaped from her lips. The Black Knight lingered for a moment, seemingly surprised by the obliteration of the darkness that had shrouded him. However, his hesitation lasted only for a fraction of a second, not nearly enough for the humans to prepare themselves for his next attack. And it was already coming. Without paying any attention to Effie, who was flying back, the devil turned with astonishing swiftness and aimed his sword at Nephi's. But before he could perform his second strike, a massive piece of rubble the size of an adult human suddenly flew through the air and crashed into the armored giant at full speed. All the Black Knight could do was lean forward and meet it with his shoulder. The boulder exploded into 1,000 pieces, leaving the devil unscathed. The creature that threw it walked through the dust with utter indifference, two ruby flames burning behind the visor of her helmet. The Stone Saint had arrived to face the Black Knight. The Stone Saint walked toward the Black Knight with stalwart indifference. Her body shone with dark radiance, and there were wisps of ghostly gray fog dancing on her elegant armor. The ruby eyes of the taciturn monster burned with menacing crimson flames. The darkness that served the devil had been vanquished by changing stars' incandescent light, but the shadows populating the ancient temple only grew deeper because of it. Now, they were shifting, as if reaching toward the saint to fall upon her shoulders like a mantle. Without slowing down, the shadow raised her shield and hit its rim twice with the edge of her sword, as though challenging the Black Knight to a battle. With the two creatures finally facing each other, it became even more apparent that there was a mysterious connection between the two of them. Despite the fact that the Black Knight towered above the graceful living statue, their general appearance and the design of their armaments were eerily similar. It was just that in front of the intricate stone-like armor of the shadow, the devil's own formidable full plate, which had been masterfully forged from indestructible black steel, seemed almost crude. Facing the original masterpiece, he looked like a clumsy impostor. Sonny knew that his intuition was right when he caught a hint of the same dim, nascent emotion that the shadow had shown toward the walking colossus. Despite the fact that the fallen devil was vastly more powerful than her and both outclassed and outranked her, witnessing him, the Stone Saint felt nothing but disdain. Contempt even. All of these observations had not taken Sonny more than half a second. In the next moment, both creatures dashed forward and collided in a furious clangor of metal. The battle had begun. Now that his core was close to being saturated to the brim by the shadow fragments Sonny had collected from hundreds of nightmare creatures and a few humans, the augmentation provided by the shadow was able to make him powerful enough to almost reach the level of an actual awakened. By the same logic, the Stone Saint should have been brought very close to the power level of a fallen abomination. Sonny even suspected that she was enhanced by the shadow even more than he would be himself. The shadow and the shadow seemed to intertwine perfectly, almost as if this was the true purpose of the augmenting facet of his aspect. The saint had slaughtered two fallen beasts even before becoming a shadow, although it had been at the cost of her life. What would she be able to do now, reborn and reinforced by the mystical power of his divine aspect? Kill a deadly bastard of a fallen devil, hopefully. But still, the gap between the two of them was just too vast. Even with the help of the shadow, the Stone Saint was clearly not a match for the Black Knight in terms of sheer power. Luckily, she was not alone. As the two creatures collided and turned into a whirlwind of steel, the humans joined the fight to support their monster. Castor appeared at a terrible speed, striking at the giant black sword with his elegant giant. The ghostly green blade slid off the surface of the greatsword without any result, but the impact of his strike managed to slow the Black Knight by a fraction of a second. That was all the Stone Saint needed to deliver a blow of her own. Closing the distance to the giant fiend in order to turn his size and reach superiority against him, she struck upward at the pommel of the greatsword with her shield. The hands of the Black Knight were thrown above his head, and using that opening, she bulldozed into his abdomen with her shoulder, sending the giant reeling. The violence of the impact was so fierce that several fractures appeared on the surface of her stone-like pauldron. As the dull metal sound rang across the grand hall, shards of stone flew into the air. But it was not in vain. The momentary gap in the defense of the devil allowed Nephis to deliver a devastating thrust with her silver longsword. Enhanced by the annihilating white flame and the miraculous enchantment of the Dawn Shard, the sword hit against the breastplate of the Black Knight's armor. and broke through, sinking deep into the body of the fiend. For a moment, everyone froze, stunned at the ease with which they were able to pierce the seemingly impregnable armor of the fallen devil. Just a moment before, Castor's giant didn't even leave a scratch on the black steel of the fiend's greatsword. But then, things took a sharp turn for the worse. The Black Knight did not seem to care about several inches of incandescent steel penetrating his chest at all. Regaining his balance, he indifferently swiped his sword down, forcing both Nephi's and the stone saint to stagger back. The black blade hit the marble floor, causing the ground to shake and throwing Neph to the ground. Before anyone could react, the devil let go of the hilt of his sword with one hand and delivered a shattering backhanded blow to the shadow. The strength of that strike would have been enough to pulverize any human, but the stone saint was made of a far more enduring material than flesh. Still, the living statue was thrown back like a broken doll. Almost instantly, the Black Knight turned to Nephi's once more. The terrifying sword flew into the air, ready to split her apart. I was right. A savage smile appeared on Sonny's face. Brandishing the midnight shard, he dashed forward and screamed. A Plan C. Plan C was very simple. It was born out of the prediction Sonny had made when discussing how they were going to kill the devil. He had suspected all along that since Neph was a perfect counter to the Black Knight's most dreadful power, he would concentrate all his attention on dealing with her first. In short, the devil was going to make killing Changing Star his #1 priority. Nephi's was indeed a perfect counter against the living darkness, but even better than that. She was the perfect bait. The black blade fell down, missing Nephi's only by a hair's breadth. She rolled back and performed an impossible handspring, launching herself into the air from the ground. Landing on the marble floor with an effortless grace of a trained acrobat, Changing Star slid back a few meters and came to a stop some distance away from the devil. But he was just as fast. No, much faster. The giant was already lunging forward to skewer her on the tip of his terrible greatsword. She shifted slightly, dodging the deadly attack, and dashed forward along the vast length of the black blade. Her sword flashed through the air and impacted against the vambrace of the menacing armor, leaving a deep scratch on its dark surface. Everything was happening so fast that other members of the cohort were having trouble joining the fight. The stone saint had just landed on the marble floor a moment ago and was currently rising back to her feet. Effie had recovered from receiving the full brunt of the Black Knight's first attack and was rushing forward, but she was still a few meters away. Kai had drawn his bow, but couldn't send an arrow flying without the risk of hitting one of his companions. With how potent the enchantment of the blood arrow was, this was something he could not allow to happen. Cassie mostly relied on echoes to fight, and since they were not enhanced by the Dawn Shard, their utility in this battle would not have been high. More than that, they risked being destroyed by a single strike from the devil. As such, she was relegated to holding back for now, and would only join the fight if things really went south. So for now, it was up to Sonny and Castor to slow the fiend down. Their only saving grace, and the point that Sonny had explained in detail, was that the terrifying greatsword, while deadly and utterly unstoppable, well, almost, was ultimately an unwieldy weapon. The Black Knight was strong enough to throw it around as though the giant blade weighed no more than a feather, and skilled enough to turn momentum and inertia into useful tools as opposed to obstacles, but he still had to obey the laws of physics. Even more importantly, the damn thing was very long, which meant that they had to stick to the fallen devil like glue in order to use its long reach against him. As the steel giant sidestepped and pulled his greatsword into a vicious horizontal swipe aimed at Changing Star, Sonny closed the distance between them and approached the devil from the opposite side. The midnight shard flashed, striking at the elbow joint of the plate armor. All Sonny achieved was leaving a small scratch on it, but he also pushed the Black Knight's hand down and closer to his body a bit, changing the angle of the swipe slightly. At the same time, Castor dove under the terrible blade and suddenly appeared right in front of the devil, thrusting his giant at the steel helmet. The Black Knight just turned his head slightly, causing the ghostly green blade to slide off the helmet without doing any damage. At the same time, he let go of the sword with one hand and threw his elbow back, almost smashing Sonny's skull in, all the while continuing his deadly strike at Nephi's. Nevertheless, their tandem attack helped Changing Star avoid being cut in half. Taking a swift step forward, she raised her own sword and received the blow on its blade. Since she had time to close the distance and was now mere centimeters away from the devil, the part of the greatsword that hit her was close to the crossguard, and as such, did not carry too much destructive force. Still, it was enough to send her crashing onto the ground, the sword sliding from her hand. Even with the three of them fighting together, they couldn't slow the cursed creature for more than a moment. But then, a moment was all they needed, because it gave Effie enough time to rejoin the fight. It also gave Kai the opportunity to take a shot. A black arrow streaked through the air and plunged right into the crack of the devil's visor. Sonny noticed a startled expression on the charming archer's face. He himself was stunned, too. No one had expected Kai to actually hit the bastard right in the only chink in his armor, least of all Kai himself. The head of the Black Knight was violently jerked backward. But in the next moment, Kai staggered and groaned. "Curse it, why am I always right?" Sonny had anticipated that result, too. He had guessed a long time ago that there was no flesh beneath the menacing black armor. Rather, the armor itself was the nightmare creature, or at least the vessel for the evil soul of a powerful revenant. As such, there was no blood for the ghastly arrow to drink. That's why Kai had been affected by the backlash of his fallen memory despite hitting his target. Just in case something like that happened, Sonny had tasked the charming archer with fashioning a few mundane arrows out of splinters of bone that was everywhere on the forgotten shore. So Kai wasn't entirely out of the fight, yet. However, the amount of damage he would be able to do to the terrifying devil was now extremely low. Damnation! But Sonny had no time to lament this turn of events. The battle was only growing more chaotic and fierce. Thanks to the incredible precision of Kai's shot, the Black Knight was disoriented for a moment. Effie arrived just at the right time to use it to their advantage. Leaning low, she used the momentum of her lunge and the bone-breaking weight of the dusk shard to deliver a devastating blow to the thigh of the steel giant. As another shockwave of sound rolled through the grand hall, the fiend staggered. But a fraction of a second later, he brought his armored fist down on the mighty huntress, causing her to reel away with a pained scream. The pommel of the black sword lurched forward, catching Castor in the chest despite how fast the proud legacy was moving. He crumbled to the floor like a broken mannequin. Lastly, the Black Knight turned his blade to Sonny, causing him to retreat. The damn bastard was simply unstoppable. None of their attacks had achieved anything except for annoying him a little. Not good, not good. Pushing herself off the ground, Nephi's looked at the fallen devil that towered above her like a bastion of darkness. Her face was pale, and there was blood flowing from her mouth. What's worse, the silver sword had slid far away and was now out of her reach. The incandescent radiance disappeared from its blade, allowing for the darkness that hid in the corners of the grand hall to slowly begin crawling back. Nothing stood between her and the Black Knight anymore. Suddenly opening his eyes wide, Sonny glanced into the depths of the cathedral. And then a simple scream escaped from his lips. "Neph, run!" As the silver sword was extinguished, Changing Star lingered for a moment. White flames ignited in her eyes, and suddenly the pristine white breastplate of the Starlight Legion armor was enveloped in blinding white light. The darkness that had begun to seep back into the grand hall of the ancient temple reeled away once more. It appeared as though Nufa's changed the target of her miraculous aspect ability, and used her armor as its conduit instead of the sword. But from the side, it simply looked like there was a furious white star burning in her chest. That momentary delay almost cost her her life. As soon as Sunny's scream echoed through the cathedral, the terrifying black blade came down once again. This time, Nuffaz seemingly had no chance to escape. But somehow she did. Pushing herself off the marble floor, she twisted her body and barely avoided the falling guillotine of the Black Knight's Grutsud, then swiftly rolled away. The next moment, she was already on her feet. As the devil lunged forward to crush her, Changing Star did something that no one would ever expect the proud daughter of the immortal Flame clan to do. She turned her back to the enemy and ran. From their early days in the labyrinth, Sunny knew that Nuffaz could be incredibly fast when she wanted to. And indeed, just a second later, she was already far away. Cursing under his breath, he followed. No matter how fast Nuffaz was, the Black Knight was faster. The devil was already pursuing his runaway prey, moving with a celerity that seemed strange for a creature of his size, especially one clad in an incredibly heavy suit of steel armor. With each moment, he drew closer and closer to Changing Star, his sword ready to reap her life. Straining his muscles to their limit, Sunny ran as fast as he could, too, desperately trying to catch up to them. With Uffa and Castor temporarily put out of commission and Cassie and Cuss sidelined, he was the only one left. He had to make it in time, no matter what. If he didn't... Come on! Gritting his teeth, Sunny somehow managed to accelerate even more. Nuffaz was already halfway through the grand hall of the cathedral. The statue of the nameless goddess on the far side of it must have appeared in her sight. It was then when she suddenly stopped and turned around, sliding on the marble floor a few meters because of the momentum. The silver sword had already been dismissed and summoned back from her soul sea. It seemed as though out of desperation, Nuffaz decided to mount one last, suicidal attack on the swiftly approaching steel giant. Or maybe she had just gone crazy. But it only seemed that way. The corners of Sunny's mouth curled upward. That's my girl. Plan C was about to come to fruition. Changing Star had performed her role perfectly. Well, what else did Sunny expect from her? All that remained was to stall the Black Knight for a few seconds. The devil descended upon the silver-haired girl in a fury of obliterating black steel. Nuffaz met him with her usual calm resolve, dodging strike after strike with incredible skill. Just like a lifetime ago, when she had been facing Castor at the dojo of the academy, she used her understanding and control of the flow of combat to breach the gap in speed between her and her opponent. She wasn't as much reacting to the deadly blows delivered by the devil as predicting them, moving to evade the strikes of the Black Grutsud before they could even happen. Of course, this deadly dance could not last. The tiniest of mistakes would have been her last, and even if she didn't make any, Nuffaz was not going to be able to keep this level of concentration for long, not to mention the insane toll this fearsome clash took on her stamina and endurance. But she didn't have to. All she needed to do was to keep the bastard busy for a couple of seconds. And when those seconds ran out, a sudden crack of breaking stone resounded in the darkness of the ancient temple. In all the commotion, the stone saint had strangely disappeared. After Sunny had confirmed that the fallen devil was targeting Nuffaz above everyone else, their strongest combatant, his shadow, was nowhere to be seen. That, of course, was on purpose. She was laying the groundwork for the plan to work, while the rest of them kept the Black Knight distracted. The plan, however, could only happen in a certain spot in the Grand Hall. That was where Changing Star had to lure the Black Knight in case he fixated on her. Following the descriptions provided to her by Sunny, she led the devil deeper into the cathedral and stopped just in the right place. And then she engaged him in a fierce battle to give the saint time to close the trap, which she did by taking a running start and crashing with all her weight into one of the tall, magnificent pillars supporting the roof of the cathedral. This pillar in particular was damaged at the base, making it uniquely unstable. Sonny knew every corner of the ruined temple like the palm of his hand, so he knew about this flaw of the pillar as well. That had been what he based Plan C on. As Sonny ran, he could see everything that followed in all its majestic brutality. The breaking of stone resounded in the vast hall of the ancient temple. A net of cracks appeared on the massive, incredibly tall column and quickly spread to a deep gash in its base. Shards of stone flew in every direction, and the column began to topple. It seemed slow at first, but in fact it wasn't. In the center of the hall, the Black Knight paused his relentless onslaught for a moment and turned his head, following the sound of cracking stone. He was a second too late. As Nuffaz dashed away, the pillar fell on the devil, crushing him under countless tons of hard stone. The massive pillar plummeted down and fell right on the Black Knight. The devil turned slightly at the last moment, lowering his sword to the ground. His crimson eyes flashed with unassailable menace. As a thunderous crash resounded in the dark hall of the ruined cathedral, pieces of stone and clouds of dust flew into the air. "Got you!" A feeling of savage joy ignited in Sonny's heart. Without slowing down, he dove into the dust. Of course, he didn't think the fiend would be destroyed by his trap, but it had to do some damage to the fearsome black armor at least. Nearing the place where he had last seen the tall, dark figure, Sonny witnessed an incredible sight. The pillar was floating high above the ground, its crushing weight resting on the shoulder of the steel giant. In the place of the impact, its surface had cracked and shattered. The Black Knight, however, had not escaped unscathed as well. His heavy breastplate fractured, revealing nothing but a mass of impenetrable, living darkness within. The pauldron on the shoulder that had received the blow was practically destroyed, leaving that whole arm hanging listlessly, twisted at a strange angle. The helmet of the devil was dented and covered by a net of small cracks, each seeping with ghostly crimson light. The Black Knight did not look good, if utterly terrifying. What was even better, though, was the fact that he was currently stuck under the pillar, unable to move. Sonny had to make use of that situation. But before he could, the devil raised his broken arm and placed it on the column. Then he lowered his head, as though gathering his strength, and effortlessly threw the monumental stone pillar into the air. Sonny's eyes widened. Diving down, he barely avoided the flying wall of granite. The pillar flew above his head and crashed down onto the marble floor, then rolled several times and came to a rest in a deafening rumble of shattering stone. The length of it blocked the grand hall, cutting the way for the rest of the cohort, and also Sonny's path of retreat. Not that he had any plans of retreating. Regaining his balance, Sonny brandished the midnight shard and dashed toward the wounded Black Knight for a vicious attack. Both he and the stone saint arrived at the same time. However, the fallen devil was still a force to be reckoned with. Despite the fact that his armor was cracked and his speed was somewhat diminished, there was still enough power in his body to obliterate all of them. Holding the Grutzud with one hand, he suddenly pulled it into a fearsome slash. The black blade whistled through the air, cutting a chaotic arc around the fiend. Sonny was forced to jump back, but the shadow managed to deflect the blow with her shield and redirect its power, slowing down only a little. In the next moment, she closed the distance to the Black Knight and delivered a terrible strike of her own, aiming at the base of his sword's blade. The knight simply moved the sword away, then violently bashed her in the head with the pommel, causing bits of the stone-like metal to fly into the air. The saint staggered back, the visor of her helmet shattered. Unlike the mass of darkness hiding in the black suit of steel armor, there was an actual face beneath hers. Sonny allowed himself to stare for a fraction of a second. This was his first time seeing the face of his shadow, after all. The stone saint looked just how he had imagined. Her skin was gray like granite, and the features of her face were almost like that of a human, with the exception that they were just too flawless. It was as though she had not been born, but actually cut from stone by a mad sculptor, one obsessed with absolute perfection. As the result, what should have been beautiful looked eerie and hideous instead. In fact, glancing at the inhumanly perfect face of his shadow, Sonny felt nothing but a cold sense of revulsion. Fright even. The fact that her haunting face was utterly devoid of any hint of human emotion only made it even more disturbing. The shadow caught herself from falling and dashed to the side, avoiding another strike from the terrifying giant, which was effortlessly chained after the first one. The greatsword fell down once more, shattering the marble plates of the floor in the spot she had been just a moment ago. It was then that Nephi's rejoined the fight. The three of them attacked the Black Knight simultaneously, perfectly coordinating their assault. Changing Star threw her long sword forward, aiming to sever the broken arm of the devil entirely. The stone saint went after the greatsword again. And Sonny did something crazy. Dashing to the enormous black blade, he stepped on its surface and ran up, using it as a ladder. He had a solid second of stability before the greatsword was pulled into another attack. Feeling it moving beneath his feet, Sonny used the momentum to jump up and grab onto the helmet of the terrifying fiend. Mounting the devil, he hung from the Black Knight's neck and delivered a savage stab at his shoulder. His aim was just a centimeter away from the edge of the pauldron. Sonny's hand was empty when he started the strike, but by the time it reached its mark, the moonlight shard was already grasped in it. During their journey back to the Dark City, he had noticed that Ascended memories received a less dramatic enhancement from the Crown of Dawn. Unlike the Awakened ones, they weren't elevated by almost an entire rank in terms of power. The augmentation, however, was still significant. Enough to breach the gap between the ghostly stiletto and the armor of the fallen devil, at least. The needle-sharp point of the moonlight shard broke through the impenetrable steel and sunk deep into the shoulder joint of the indestructible black armor. Obviously, Sonny knew that this strike would not do a lot of damage to the fiend, but dealing damage was not his goal. Devil or not, fallen or not, the Black Knight still had to obey the laws of physics, in particular having several inches of steel glass stuck in the joint of his armor was inevitably going to reduce the mobility of his arm. Indeed, with both of his arms damaged, the speed with which the fiend was able to move his greatsword around considerably diminished. It was still utterly terrifying, nevertheless, but not insurmountable anymore. Just a moment faster than the Black Knight, the stone saint stepped over the black blade and pinned it to the floor with one of her greaves. Using all of her weight to keep it down, she threw her sword aside and raised her shield high above her head with both hands. For a moment time slowed down, and then the shadow brought the shield down, delivering a devastating blow to the weakest point of the greatsword. The rim of the stone shield hit against the black steel, and with a deafening ringing, the greatsword shattered, augmented by the shadow and with the help of 900 fragments that Sonny had collected. The saint had become incredibly strong. The graceful stone body of the taciturn monster hid incredible power to begin with, and now it was vastly enhanced. Holding her shield with both hands, the shadow delivered a devastating blow at the weakest point of the black blade. The blade, which was pinned between the marble floor and her greave, rang deafeningly and shattered. Still mounting the Black Knight, Sonny grinned with vicious joy. Then he let go of the dented helmet of the devil and pushed himself off, performing a backward flip and landing nimbly several meters away. Nephi's immediately disengaged, too. Both of them knew that there was nothing more dangerous than an enemy on the brink of death. With nothing to lose, humans often relinquished any sense of self-preservation and turned berserk, taking their killer with them to the grave. Nightmare creatures were much the same, only more terrifying. Despite the fact that Sonny was sure that the devil's weakness hid in his sword, he wasn't certain what would happen if the blade was actually broken. Hopefully, the Black Knight would just crumble into a pile of steel. If not, it would be better to be far away when they found out. As the shards of the black blade rained on the floor and the stone saint fell on one knee, a shudder ran through the devil's body. The darkness hiding in the corners of the ruined cathedral suddenly boiled and lunged forward in a wave. But none of it reached the Black Knight, annihilated by the radiance of changing stars' intricate white armor. The devil froze in a twisted pose, his hands powerlessly hanging down, his back bent. The black steel of his armor was rusting. It was swiftly turning dull brown, its luster gone, its once impregnable surface looking corroded and brittle. Then he slowly and laboriously raised his head and turned it slightly to the side, as if staring at the face of the nameless goddess, whose statue oversaw the dark hall of the ruined cathedral for thousands of years. As the devil looked at the goddess, the crimson light of his eyes slowly weakened and dimmed, and then suddenly exploded into furious red flames. The rusty armor came apart, exposing the mass of darkness hiding within. The darkness stretched its limbs and rose above the kneeling shadow, the parts of the armor that floated in it giving the creature a vaguely humanoid shape. Revealing its true form, a ghostly colossus made of darkness and rusting steel towered above the taciturn monster like an omen of death, two crimson fires burning furiously in the black depths. Another flame appeared just beneath them, like a twisted mouth made from the flames of hell. And then a terrifying roar shook the ancient temple. Sonny took an involuntary step back, a feeling of dread rising from the depths of his soul. His eyes searched for Nephi's and found her standing a few meters behind the stone saint. Changing Star was hesitating, looking at the dark apparition with an uncertain expression. She caught his gaze, lingered for a moment and then nodded, understanding what Sonny wanted to convey without the need for any words. Then, Nephi's cautiously backed away, not letting the devil out of her sight. What was going to happen next was not something a human could survive, not a sleeper at least. With a harrowing fury, the creature of darkness crashed down on the shadow. Its hands tore through the air and wrapped around the taciturn monster's neck, then raised the living statue in the air as if her stone body weighed nothing. The devil brought the saint high above the marble floor of the ruined cathedral and squeezed her neck, as if trying to strangle her. A net of cracks streaked through the shadow's armor, bits of stone falling down. Through all of it, the emotionless expression on the hauntingly inhuman face of the saint did not change one bit. But in her ruby eyes, a hint of a feeling appeared, much stronger than ever before. Disdain. Letting go of the shield, she raised her hands, grasped the vambraces of the rusting armor, and easily shattered them in her grip. As another roar resounded in the darkness, the taciturn monster fell back to the ground. Landing with nimble grace, she instantly dodged the claws of the apparition, which had bent down to shatter the living statue once and for all. Then, she took a step forward. The stone saint was right beneath the leaning devil now. As her ruby eyes flashed with ruthlessness, she lunged forward and delivered a crushing blow to his chest. Her gauntlet tore through the breastplate of the rusted armor and sank deep into the living darkness, right where a human heart would have been. Or a soul core. A moment later, the crimson flames burning in the depths of the dark creature exploded into a wave of blinding red light. And disappeared. The dark essence of the devil dissipated like fog, its remnants vanquished by changing Star's radiance. The pieces of armor fell to the ground in a clangor of steel. The terrifying devil of the cathedral, the Black Knight, was dead. Sonny threw his head back and let out an exhilarated, vengeful laugh. Die, die, you bastard. Die and go to hell forever. Oh, revenge tasted so great. A moment later, The voice of the spell whispered sweetly into his ear. You have slain a fallen devil, forsaken knight. Your shadow grows stronger. Sunny smiled. Anything else you want to add? A memory and an echo. However, a moment later, he forgot all about the spell. A cold shiver ran down his spine. Because right in front of him, something very strange was happening to the stone saint. Her hand was still raised, frozen in the same position as when she had pierced the heart of the living darkness with her fist. And in it, what the hell is that thing? Grasped in the shadow's fist was a strange, beautiful, and ominous gem. It was utterly black, as though suffused with impenetrable darkness. The glossy black surface seemed to devour light, turning the vast hall of the ruined cathedral even darker than it had been before. Deep within that black void, crimson flames burned with a menacing red glow. It was pulsating in a slow and bizarre rhythm, drowning everything around in dim red light. Painted by it, the stone saint seemed to be drenched in blood. The gem she held looked like a bloody, still-beating heart that she had torn out of someone's chest. Gazing at it, Sonny felt a strange sense of foreboding. What the hell is that thing? The gem looked sort of like a soul shard, but different. He had never seen a black shard to begin with, or one radiating such an intense glow. It also didn't seem like a piece of a broken core. On the contrary, it appeared whole. Is that what a soul core of a nightmare creature looks like? No, not a soul core. A soul. Stunned, Sonny counted the crimson flames burning in the depths of the black gem. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4 flames for the 4 cores of fallen devil. The thing that his shadow held in her hand was the Black Knight's soul, or some sort of his essence at least. But how had it turned into a material form? Did the stone saint do it? If so, how? No, why? What is she doing with it? As Sonny and Nephi's looked in stunned silence, the shadow finally moved. Bringing the black gem close to her face, she lingered for a moment. A hint of a dark, macabre emotion appeared in her eyes. And then the stone saint swallowed it. Sonny blinked. And what? The shadow opened her mouth, bit into the eerie crystal and swallowed it. Just like that, the soul of the Black Knight was devoured. The red glow it emanated disappeared, returning the world to its natural shade. And a moment after that, the stone saint fell into the shadows and disappeared, too. Wait, I didn't dismiss her. What the hell is happening? Nephi's looked at him with a perplexed expression. What just happened? What did she do? For once, Sonny didn't have to twist the truth and deceive anyone. Opening his mouth, he honestly said, I have no idea. Walking over to the pile of rusty steel that remained after the devil had been destroyed, Sonny moved it around with his foot for a bit, and then mumbled. There's no shards left, it's empty. Changing Star remained silent for a few moments, then frowned. Finally, she said, Your echo is very peculiar. While everyone was recovering from the fight and tending to their wounds, Sonny walked to a secluded corner and dove into the soul sea. The tranquil expanse of still water met him with familiar silence. Glancing at the rows of motionless shadows standing at the edge of it, Sonny noticed that the Black Knight had joined their ranks. The steel giant stood among all the other creatures Sonny had slain, just as empty as the rest of them. There was no trace of the menacing and deadly fallen devil left. Now, he was just one of the shadows. Sonny grinned. Welcome, you bastard. Make yourself at home. You're not going anywhere else ever anyway. A feeling of deep, dark satisfaction grasped his heart. Staring at the motionless form of his sworn enemy, Sonny had to stop himself from kicking the Black Knight with all his strength. He was just a shadow now, after all. Kicking him would have been like kicking the air. Plus, Sonny wasn't vindictive to that degree. Killing the bastard once was enough for him. Who's the one laughing now, huh? I won't deny it, you got me good. But I'm still breathing while you're dead. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. This world, no. Both this world and the real one were full of creatures that were bigger, stronger, and more powerful than Sunny. Many of them had either threatened his existence or felt compelled to treat him like dirt to show their superiority. But he was still here despite all of them, neither destroyed nor subjugated. He was free, alive, and growing stronger with each day. One day, they would be the ones cowering in front of him or be destroyed by him, just like the Black Knight had been. With a dark expression, Sunny turned away and walked to stand beneath the black sun of his shadow core. Then, he summoned the Stone Saint. But nothing happened. Sunny frowned, then repeated the summon again, to the same effect. Suddenly worried, he willed the runes to appear in the air in front of him. Luckily, his worst fears did not come true. The Stone Saint was still listed as his shadow. Then what is going on with her? Concentrating on the runes describing her name, Sunny made it expand and read. Shadow Stone Saint. Shadow rank awakened. Shadow class monster. Shadow attributes battle master, stalwart, spark of divinity. Shadow description. Shadow Saint was created by the treacherous lost from light in the cursed darkness of the forgotten shore. Shadow fragments 80/200. So far, everything was the same. Even the number of shadow fragments he had fed her did not change. However, there was a new string of runes shimmering beneath that number, where nothing had been before. When Sunny saw it, his eyes widened. The runes read, "The Stone Saint is evolving." He lingered for a few moments, and then looked up at the shadow core. Somewhere inside, his shadow was resting in the waves of nurturing dark flames, her very being going through a mysterious transformation. It appeared as though consuming the soul of the Black Knight had allowed her to enter a stage of growth that Sunny had not anticipated. How long would that evolution process take? And what kind of a transformation was the saint going through? Sunny had no idea. However, he couldn't wait to find out. Evolving, the Stone Saint was evolving. Leaving the mindscape of the Soul Sea, Sunny furrowed his brow. His eyes, however, were full of excitement. What exactly about her was going to change, though? There weren't that many possibilities. It could be either her rank, her class, or her attributes. It was logical to assume that by defeating an opponent of a higher rank, the shadow would be able to ascend to a new rank herself. However, there was a flaw in that logic. The Black Knight wasn't the first fallen creature Sunny and the Saint had slain. In fact, he was the third, with the Corpse Eater and the Spire Messenger being the first two. That's not even counting the 2 iron spiders the living statue had butchered before falling to Sunny's blade herself. But she had not done anything like pulling a black gem out of their corpses before. So most likely, what allowed her to absorb the soul of that particular nightmare creature was not the mere fact of its incredible power. It was the strange but obvious kinship that the two of them shared. At least Sunny felt that this guess of his was right. That didn't help him understand what changes would occur to the taciturn monsters, though. Still, it was a very valuable piece of information to learn. In the future, if Sunny wanted to evolve his shadows, he would have to find not only a powerful, but also a suitable opponent for them to defeat. A kindred abomination of higher rank or class. Tilting his head, he tried to remember if there was another creature on the forgotten shore he knew of whose soul could be fed to the saint. For a moment, the image of the walking colossus appeared in his mind. Yeah, no, not gonna even think about that. Shaking his head, Sunny smiled slightly and walked over to his companions. Now that their deal had been concluded, the future he was so afraid of was finally upon them. The light of lanterns invaded the spacious room that had once belonged to the priestess of this ancient temple. With 6 people entering its peaceful haven, however, it didn't seem so vast anymore. Sunny looked around and sighed. The hidden quarters were just like he had left him. There were pieces of simple but luxurious furniture carved out of pale wood, with a few mismatched things that he had scavenged from the ruins. The stone walls were decorated with intricate engravings. An empty chest that used to be full of shimmering soul shards stood dark and empty. Feeding the stone saint had really bankrupted him. Sadly, being the master of a hungry shadow was not the cheapest of ambitions. On one of the walls, sets of lines were scratched into the stone, marking all the days he had spent living in the ruined cathedral. For a long time, this had been his home. The best home he ever had, really, which was a sad thing to say about a windowless stone room hidden in the middle of a cursed city. But Sonny liked it a lot. He was going to miss this dark, quiet place very much. The other members of the cohort, with the exception of Effie and Cassie, were looking around with interest. Even Neff showed a bit of curiosity. With a strange look on his face, Kai turned to Sonny and asked, This is where you lived?" Sonny raised an eyebrow and shrugged. "Yeah, why?" The beautiful archer smiled with visible delight. "No, nothing. It's just that this place is so tasteful. I did not expect your residence to be this chic." "What is that supposed to mean?" Sonny frowned. "What did you expect it to be?" Kai looked down, suddenly flustered. "Oh, for some reason I always imagined you sleeping on a floor in a cave. Yeah, stupid, I know. Why would there be a cave in a temple?" Hearing that, Effie couldn't help but laugh. Wait till you see what's in his closet, Night." Sonny gave her a menacing look, but thought better of saying anything. He understood that the huntress was just trying to lighten the mood. Knowing what was going to come next, every member of the cohort was consumed by fear and doubt right now. Effie more than the rest, because her role in the spectacle that Gunnalug had planned for them was especially cruel. Sonny sighed. A bit later they were sitting around the hearth, the smell of food still lingering in the air. Everyone was silent, looking at the fire, their minds consumed with dark thoughts. Sonny knew that he had to make a decision now, but felt reluctant to do so. Instead, he just watched the shadows dance on the walls of the hidden chamber. After a while, Nephi's finally broke the silence. Turning to him, she lingered for a bit and then asked, "We will be leaving in the morning. Will you come with us?" Her voice sounded even, as always, but Sonny knew her well enough to discern notes of a suppressed emotion in it. "Hope. Hope is the poison that will get you killed." But no, this was the old Sonny talking, one who was comfortable hiding behind his insanity, one who had given up, who was too afraid to face the ruthless truth and pay the price to take what belonged to him, was his by right. Triumph, salvation, and hope. Sonny was done being afraid. With a calm expression, he looked at Nephi's and said, "The day after tomorrow, I still have things to finish in the Dark City. I will join you the day after tomorrow for better or worse." She was silent for a few moments, and then a soft smile appeared on her face. "Thank you. I have some preparations to make too. We will return to the bright castle together then." He gave her a nod and turned away. Nephi's had never shown any sign of being able to feel fear, at least not that he remembered, but he knew that it was just a front. In fact, she knew fear all too well, better than anyone here except maybe for him. She was introduced to it at a very young age, after all. So he suspected that behind her indifferent face and even voice, she must have been scared too. She was just a young girl after all. And it was she who was going to fight the immortal bright lord to the death soon, not them. Sonny looked at the shadows. One day, after one day, the prophecy will begin to come true. As soon as the dawn came, bringing with it the mournful sound of retreating waves, Nephi's and her cohort left the ruined cathedral. Sonny remained alone, standing on the edge between the darkness of the old temple and the light of the new day. Lingering in the ornate doorway, he remained motionless for a while and watched as the artificial sun rose into the bleak gray skies above the cursed city. After months spent in the company of other humans, being by himself once again felt strange. Just like it had felt strange to be with other people after all the time he had spent on his own here before that. Turning around, Sonny returned into the darkness. The grand hall of the ruined cathedral was peaceful and quiet. Without the menacing steel guardian, there was no one here to disturb the silence anymore. Even the darkness that populated the corners was empty and docile now, not at all the living entity it had been once. It felt sort of lonesome. Freely walking through the echoing expanse of the magnificent hall, Sonny looked around, taking in the sight of the cathedral that had sheltered him in the past from a new perspective. Despite spending so much time here, he had never seen it like this. In the same way the inhabitants of the Dark City must have seen it all those years ago. Sonny had only looked down on the hall from the height of one of the ancient temple's support beams. It looked majestic, but it was also not safe anymore. With the Black Knight dead, no one was left to defend the cathedral from the nightmare creatures that would want to claim it as their nest. So Sonny couldn't stay here for long. Not that he had the luxury of that choice anymore. Throwing one last look at the beautiful dark hall, Sonny sighed and began climbing the statue of the nameless goddess. Back in the hidden chamber, it was once again utterly dark. Sonny hesitated for a bit and began collecting his belongings. It didn't take him long. Growing attached to material things was pointless on the forgotten shore. There was no way to take them with him to the real world, after all, if he was even going to survive that long. But he still felt sad leaving all of his spoils behind. Back in the real world, Sonny never had a home like this, nor a lot of stuff to call his own. He had dreamed of enjoying a lavish lifestyle after becoming an awakened, but got stuck in this hell instead. This spacious room he called his home was a form of consolation. But now he had to leave. In the end, he only took the bare necessities and then tidied the place up, wishing to leave it clean and orderly despite knowing that there was little chance of anyone stumbling on this place again. After everything was done, Sonny glanced at the tranquil room and hesitated for a bit. Then he walked over to the wall where he had once scratched countless lines into the stone to count the days and summoned the prowling thorn. He wanted to leave a mark of his presence here, something to tell that he had lived in this hidden chamber in the ancient ruined cathedral in the Dark City on the forgotten shore. In this world, a small mark to witness that he had been here, had struggled here, and then left to fight for a chance to escape. Sonny wanted to come up with some profound words, but nothing came to mind. He wasn't really a profound person anyway. What he really wanted to carve into the wall was his true name. But even now, the paranoia stopped him. What if someone would come here one day and read it out loud? What a funny disaster that would be. Finally, he raised the kun and carved something beneath the lines that marked the days he had spent living in the ruined cathedral. Then Sonny turned around and walked away. There were 2 runes left on the wall behind him. One meaning sun, the other meaning loss. There were 2 things Sonny wanted to accomplish before tomorrow morning. One was in the ruins of a library that he had never finished exploring, and the other one was right here in the ruined cathedral. Returning to the grand hall with his rucksack on his shoulder, Sonny walked past the statue of the nameless goddess and dove into one of the doors leading into the temple's inner sanctum. He had never been there before, kept away by the living darkness and the Black Knight. But now that the devil was gone, Sonny was finally going to see what was hidden inside. Walking through the rooms and corridors that the priests and priestesses had once used, he looked around and didn't notice anything of interest. Everything was pretty much destroyed and ruined, with only a few mundane things remaining untouched. There was nothing here at all, at least that was what others would think. Sonny, however, suddenly stopped in front of a certain wall and tilted his head. There was nothing special about that wall, at least nothing that could be seen. but he could feel a heavy mass of shadows hiding behind it, as though there was a hollow space there. After searching for a while, he found a hidden lever and pressed it. Or at least he tried. The ancient mechanism had rusted through and disintegrated over the thousands of years of neglect, of course. With a sigh, Sonny summoned the midnight shard, looked closer at the hollow wall, and inserted the tackeye into the seam between its moving parts. Then, he unceremoniously used the unbreakable blade as a lever and pushed with all his inhuman strength. With a terrible scraping sound, a part of the wall slid away. The air rushed past Sonny, entering the dark mouth of a narrow corridor. Behind it, a set of stone stairs led down. Deep down underground. With a resentful grimace, Sonny flourished the midnight shard to shake off the dust that clung to it, put it on his shoulder, and entered the secret passage. The hidden passage led Sonny underground, twisting and turning through the mass of stone. Despite the fact that he had been cautiously walking forward for a few minutes now, Sonny felt that he was still beneath the cathedral. In fact, by his estimation, he was approaching its center. And indeed, right beneath the spot where the statue of the goddess should have been, the narrow passage opened into a larger room. In it, a deep well leading even further down was situated, with a winding staircase spiraling down into the darkness. Sonny frowned. What is it with this place and creepy dark wells? Going further down was going to place him dangerously close to the catacombs. He knew all too well what kind of danger that would pose. The last time Sonny had ventured into the maze of ancient tunnels below the city, he barely escaped alive. After hesitating for a while, he stepped onto the staircase and began descending. Deep, ancient shadows surrounded Sonny, giving him a little comfort. At least he was among his kin. After a minute or so of walking down the stairwell, Sonny entered a large chamber that seemed to be carved into the bedrock, as opposed to being constructed by human hand. On the other side of it, a large door forged from black steel stood, illuminated by two burning torches. Two thoughts entered Sonny's mind simultaneously. The first one was that the metal from which the monolithic door was made looked eerily familiar. It was the same dark, lusterless, impenetrable alloy that the Black Knight had been made of. The second thought was even more disturbing. How come those torches are still burning? Had they been aflame for several thousand years? Come to think of it, the torches looked very strange. They seemed to be producing light, but it was pale and ghostly. There was no heat that came with it, too. The shadows cast by the ghostly flames were the most disturbing, though. Because of the movements of the fire, they were supposed to be dancing on the floor. But instead, the shadows were absolutely motionless. It was as though the light of the torches had trapped and paralyzed them somehow. Sonny thought for a while, and then ordered his own shadow to stay back. The shadow did not protest. In fact, it was visibly relieved. Taking a few exaggerated steps back, it merged with the deep darkness at the exit of the stairwell and waited there, glancing nervously at the strange, motionless shadows from time to time. Sonny cautiously approached the black door and lowered the midnight shard into a protective stance. He was ready to face any sort of danger. But nothing attacked him. The only thing that happened was a sudden chill that ran through Sonny's body when he had entered the circle of light cast by the two ghostly torches. These torches they are definitely some sort of a protective charm. I am almost sure that their power can harm even shadows. The question he had to ask himself, though, was this: were the torches meant to keep something from entering the space that hid behind the black door? Or were they meant to keep something in? Well, there was only one way to find out. What Sonny was doing seemed absolutely crazy, but in fact, it was not. He had not come into this underground chamber just because of idle curiosity or because of being blinded by greed and the prospect of finding a treasure. What led him here and pushed him to study the black door was his intuition. By now, Sonny had to admit that his intuition was more than a mere manifestation of his subconscious. It had turned out to be correct one too many times, especially ever since he had consumed the drop of ichor. After that day, he was able to sense the presence of divinity, and sometimes he was even drawn to it, like he was drawn to this cathedral and to the mysterious key that lay buried in the body of the Lord of the Dead. The two seemed connected, and Sonny felt that he was about to find out how and why. But it was not all his intuition was capable of. There were other aspects to it, too. In fact, Sonny suspected that it had more to do with his faded attribute than it had to do with the spark of divinity. If he were to guess, he would say that after he had been changed by the ichor, that attribute was slightly enhanced, giving him the ability to sense subtle tremors that ran through the strings of fate from time to time. The strings that were, apparently, tightly wrapped around his body. The combination of the change that happened to his eyes and his close relationship with those strings gave Sonny a slight affinity to revelations and fate, similar to the one Cassie had possessed, but infinitely less potent. It was enough to guide him to this door and make him want to open it, nevertheless. Stepping close to the monolithic black door, Sonny gazed at it and came to the conclusion that not even an entire army would have been able to break through this monstrous barrier. There was, however, a small keyhole hidden on its dark surface. Pulling on the string tied around his neck, Sonny took off the small metal key that hung on it and gripped it tightly in his hand. After hesitating for a few moments, he carefully inserted the key into the lock of the black door. It fit perfectly. As soon as Sonny put the key into the lock, the faint light of divinity it emanated suddenly became a little bit brighter. Sonny sighed, then ruddered himself and turned the key. Something clicked inside the metal door, and then it silently opened. The pale light of the ghostly torches swayed, as though moved by an otherworldly wind. Behind the door, a small room was carved into the rock, and in it, a corpse in a dark mantle was chained to the floor inside a circle. Sonny couldn't tell if the corpse belonged to a man or a woman, because there was a strange mask covering its face. The mask was made out of black lacquered wood and carved to resemble the face of a ferocious demon. Its teeth were bared, with 4 fangs protruding from its mouth. The mask was crowned with 3 twisted horns. Inside the black chasms of its eyes, there was nothing but utter darkness. Sonny held his breath, affected by the disturbing scene in front of him. The corpse was kneeling on the floor of the small cell, its hands chained to the floor. There was a circle carved into the stone around it, with countless symbols that Sonny could not understand surrounding it. However, the circle was broken. In the thousands of years since the fall of the Dark City, the floor of the dungeon cell had cracked, with several fractures running straight through the intricate engraving. Whatever it was the circle was meant to contain had either perished or escaped a long time ago. Now, the only thing that remained was a withered corpse. Coming closer, Sonny took another look at the person who had been imprisoned and died under the ruined cathedral, in a cell situated exactly beneath the statue of the nameless goddess. Because of the dark mantle and the black lacquered mask, Sonny couldn't glean a lot of information about the corpse. It seemed to belong to a human, but other than that, everything about it was a mystery. What terrible sin had this person committed to be condemned to this awful death? Strangely, Sonny's intuition was silent. It was as though there was nothing in front of him at all. To his sixth sense, the prisoner of the underground cell appeared as an empty space. Weird. This person had clearly been either hated or feared a lot to be locked behind all these barriers. Surely, finding such a creature would affect my fate. Why don't I feel anything then? With a tense frown, he took a deep breath and carefully stepped inside the circle. It was then that Sonny noticed a chaotic mess of runes drawn on the floor near the prisoner's left hand. The sight of them almost sent him into a seizure. Staggering away, Sonny fell to his knees and threw up. Ugh, damn it. Those runes. Those were the same runes the spell used to describe the mysterious unknown. Only here, the intensity of the terrible effect they had on the mind of anyone who saw them was much, much stronger. What the hell? Wiping his mouth, Sonny grimaced and glanced at the masked corpse with a bit of resentment. Then he picked himself off the floor, took a deep breath, and looked at the terrible runes once again. Immediately, Sonny felt a splitting headache and a sickening, terrible sensation spreading through his mind. It was as though all his thoughts and memories were being torn and twisted. But despite all of it, Sonny persevered and kept staring at the final message that the prisoner had left behind. He knew he couldn't read the runes. He didn't know that particular language, and the spell either was forbidden, incapable, or refused to translate them. But for some reason, Sonny felt compelled to try. Fighting through the intense pain, he slowly studied the strange runes, and then, suddenly, his eyes widened. Because right below the chaotic mess of them, a line of text was written in the script he was familiar with, the usual runic language that the spell always used. This time, it did not provide any translation. Luckily, Sonny had studied these runes and knew enough about them to understand what was written himself. The last thing the person imprisoned under the cathedral wrote before succumbing to death made him shudder. Scratched into the stone was a short prayer. Hail Weaver, demon of fate, firstborn of the... Sonny stared at the runes until he was on the verge of losing consciousness. Only then did he turn away and close his eyes. The nauseating dissonance of the terrible runes stayed carved into his mind. Only after several minutes passed did it fade a little, allowing him to breathe again. So the mysterious weaver whose forbidden lineage he had inherited was, in fact, associated with fate, just like Sonny himself. What were the chances? That's fated for you, I guess. The word he translated as demon wasn't the one used to describe nightmares creatures of the third rank, but a different one. Perhaps calling it a spirit or a demon would have been more suitable, a mortal, but powerful and ominous deity, one different from gods but sharing the same nature. However, Sonny wasn't that versed in mystical terminology. All he knew was that the runic language was incredibly rich in words describing all types of monsters and creatures, while the human language wasn't. Hence, demon was fine with him. Apart from the tantalizing revelation about the mysterious weaver, he had noticed one other important thing by forcing himself to study the runes. Before, Sonny had thought that there was a single entity that the spell refused to call by its name, and simply described as unknown, leading him to call it the unknown. Yes, Sonny was not that imaginative when it came to word choice. Whether the unknown were a kind of beings, a single existence, or a force of nature, he did not know. But now he realized that there were actually two types of forbidden runes, and two things that the spell did not know how or did not want to mention. One was the same as those used in the description of the drop of ichor, which stated that the vile thieving bird was hated both by the gods and by the unknown. It also said that the reflection of the unknown stayed forever frozen in the depths of Weaver's pupils, and that just looking at it drove the thieving bird mad. The other was the same as those used in the description of the stone saint, which was created by the last child of the, and now here by the dead prisoner, who had called Weaver the firstborn of the unknown. What the hell is all of this supposed to mean? His suspicion that Weaver had something to do with the creation of the nightmare spell only grew stronger after learning that it. They had something to do with the domain of fate. After all, the spell seemed to be weaved out of numerous strings of fate, and there was this being called Weaver, who had the blood of gods in their veins, but was also somehow connected to the unknown. Feeling his headache only growing stronger, Sonny winced and shook his head. Later, I will think about it later. There would be time to ponder about all this later, Or not if he dies trying to escape the forgotten shore. Either way, that time was not now. Turning back to the chained corpse, Sonny cautiously avoided looking at the dangerous runes and kneeled in front of it. He wanted to know what was hiding behind the mask. But as soon as he touched it, the corpse suddenly shattered and fell apart, turning into dust right in front of his eyes. Even its dark mantle rotted and disappeared, as though the thousands of years that had passed since the fall of the Dark City and the destruction of the cathedral finally caught up with it. Soon, all that was left was a pile of dust, and the lacquered mask lying on top of it, its black surface glinting slightly in the pale light of the ghostly torches. Sonny looked at the black mask and the darkness hiding in its eyes. Its features were not as much contorted as fearsome by nature. It was simultaneously fearsome and somber, bestial and regal, as though existing at the border of all things. But most of all, the striking mask radiated a sense of mystery. The vicious fangs, the twisting horns, the black lacquered wood of it all once again, his intuition was silent. There was nothing he felt toward the black mask, as though it didn't even exist. How strange. Sonny waited for a few moments, then picked up the mask and brought it to his face to take a closer look at it. But just a moment after his fingers touched the sleek surface of the polished wood, the mask suddenly disintegrated into a swarm of countless white sparks. Acting like water, the stream of light flowed toward Sonny's chest and entered into his body, disappearing into the dark depths of his shadow core. The voice of the spell thundered suddenly, louder than it had ever been before. "You have received a memory." Sonny remained motionless for a few seconds, thinking about what just happened. By now, he knew that some memories could exist outside of the soul cores, just like how shard memories did. Was the black mask one of them? Somehow he felt that it wasn't. Why, I am even guessing. Let's just take a look. The reason he was lingering was because of the magnitude of the situation. Sonny didn't know anything about the mysterious mask, but he believed that this relic of the past was truly unusual. The circumstances that had led to its discovery were too extraordinary, and the place it was hidden in was too uncanny to think otherwise. So he was understandably apprehensive. With a bit of tension, Sonny dove into his soul sea and looked up at the spheres of light floating around the black sun of the shadow core. There was a new one there, which seemed to be much brighter than the rest. Summoning it down, he soon found himself looking into the eyes of the dark mask that hovered in front of him. It was as though he was facing an invisible person wearing it. Shifting uncomfortably, Sonny lowered his gaze a little and looked beneath the black lacquered wood. A moment later, he had to suppress the involuntary desire to cover his eyes with a hand. Inside the black mask, 7 radiant embers were burning with such intensity that it almost blinded him. All around them, incalculable ethereal strings were weaved into a pattern so vast and intricate that it almost seemed boundless. 7 anchors gods. Stunned by the visage of the mask's spellweave, Sonny hesitated for a bit and summoned the runes that described it. What he saw made him take a step back and gasp. Memory Weaver's Mask. Memory Rank Divine. Memory Tier VII. Memory Type Tool. Memory Description. Weaver believed that knowledge was the origin of power and so always hid behind numerous lies, wearing them as a mantle. No one knew Weaver's thoughts, Weaver's face, and Weaver's heart. Even the gods could not see what hid behind the mask. Memory Enchantments, Mantle of Lies, Simple Trick. Sonny had to look away for a moment to take a breath. Divine Memory of the 7th Tier, Holy Hell. Words weren't enough to describe his astonishment. He was, however, surprised to see that the mask only had 3 enchantments. Sonny expected such a powerful memory to have dozens of them. Judging by how boundless and insanely complicated the weave of it was, there had to be that much at least. Just what were these 3 enchantments to require a myriad of diamond strings to support them? Turning back to the runes, he concentrated on the enchantments and read further. Enchantment, Mantle of Lies. Enchantment description hides the identity of its master. That description sounded very simple, but looking at the spellweave of the black mask, Sonny could tell that this enchantment was anything but. In fact, it was so vast and powerful that his mind was failing to even comprehend the scale of it. The enchantment was indeed designed to protect the identity of the person wearing the mask from prying eyes, but what it actually meant was that any form of detection was powerless against it. And Sonny suspected that any was not a figure of speech in this case, but simply a constatation of fact. For example, Cassie's aspect ability, which allowed her to see a person's attributes, would not work on someone wearing the mask. There were countless similar abilities among the awakened, none of which would work either. I guess that explains why my intuition was silent about the prisoner and the mask itself. Whatever kind of fate-related sixth sense I have is also countered by that thing. Even more terrifying was the fact that the enchantment was not aimed at just the awakened. The description of the weaver's mask stated that even the gods could not see through it, and it was honest truth. Nothing could penetrate the barriers of the mantle of lies, not even the sight of a god. Sonny gulped. Scary. But then, this incredible and frightening enchantment did not even take up a tenth of the volume of the ethereal diamond strings hiding beneath the surface of the black lacquered mask. The second enchantment was much the same. It was called, by which the spell was telling Sonny that it wasn't going to say anything about it. Its description was also empty. However, Sonny could tell that it had something to do with sight just by looking at the weave. He could also tell that it was not a passive enchantment, but an active one, meaning that currently he could not access it. Usually, that would mean that he would be able to once he became a true awakened, but in this case, the amount of soul essence required to keep the enchantment activated for more than a fraction of a second was so vast that no awakened would have been able to. Only a saint would, perhaps. However, Sonny was not sure that he wanted to try even if he had the ability. The things Weaver saw were capable of driving unholy creatures insane, so it was wise to avoid going anywhere near that enchantment in the future, most likely. Most of the spellweave of the Weaver's mask, however, was dedicated to the third enchantment, one that was called a simple trick. Judging by the mind-boggling complexity of the pattern that made it possible, that trick of Weaver's was anything but simple, though. It was the most bizarre, intricate, and ingenious thing that Sonny had ever seen. Curious, he glanced at the description and froze. His eyes opened wide. The runes gleaming in the air read, Enchantment, Simple Trick. Enchantment description reverses the effect of one's flaw. Sonny remained silent for a long time, staring at the black mask. The tranquil sea of his soul was still and silent, not at all like the storm that was currently raging in his heart. After a while he thought, that Weaver was one sly guy, girl, person, being. Well, the fact that I don't even know that much only serves to prove the point, and I thought I was good at deceit and manipulation. How devious one must be to not let even the gods, even the nightmare spell, know anything about them. But it was fitting in a strange kind of way. If Weaver's domain was that of fate, there was no other way. Fate was a terrifying but subtle tool. Manipulating it to your advantage required a very special kind of genius, one that was directly opposite to any kind of directness, straightforwardness, and brutal power. However, if given the choice, Sonny would have preferred to face War God in battle than to make someone like Weaver his enemy. Masterful liars were far more dangerous than deadly warriors. He knew it better than most. Exiting the Soul Sea, Sonny hesitated for a little and then summoned the Weaver's mask. The cool wooden surface of the mask appeared on his face, held in place by some invisible force. Immediately, his vision changed slightly. Everything became sharper, clearer, more vivid. Sonny could feel the mask reaching into his eyes and connecting to something, the strange legacy he had inherited by consuming the drop of Weaver's blood. He sensed his intuition becoming more potent, too. It was as though he could almost see the mysterious strings of fate that span across the entire world. Almost. Glancing at the pile of dust that remained of the prisoner, Sonny frowned slightly. The identity of the person who had been wearing the Weaver's mask remained a secret. Just who had this corpse belonged to, and how had they ended up chained to the floor in a hidden dungeon cell beneath the majestic cathedral? The easiest thing to assume was that it was Weaver themselves, but Sonny dismissed that theory immediately. From everything he knew about the original master of the mask, the power of that creature was just below that of the gods, and that of the unknown, perhaps. If Weaver appeared on the Forgotten Shore, the whole Dark City would have been wiped out of existence before any harm was done to them. So who could have been wearing Weaver's mask? Some powerful carrier of the nightmare spell that had received it as a memory, just how Sonny did. Well, if Weaver was really a demon, which was a strange kind of a lesser deity, was there a cult dedicated to them? Had there been priests and followers of Weaver? The message the prisoner had left behind sounded awfully close to a prayer. Had that person been deemed a heretic and condemned to this place for that reason? Sonny sighed. There was no way to know. Hesitating for a bit, he turned away and left the somber dungeon cell behind. He only had this one day to finish all the things he had left undone in the Dark City. There was no time for fruitless pondering. Once outside, Sonny walked over to the place where he had left his shadow and took a look at himself through its eyes. What he saw made him blink a couple of times. Huh. The black lacquered mask sat snugly on his face, hiding his features. He couldn't even see his eyes, which were drowned in darkness. What's more, even his height was somehow unclear. Sonny didn't actually become taller, but from the side it looked as though he did, sort of. 1 second it did, and the next one it did not. It was sort of similar to how people's faces changed when lighted from different directions. In any case, he couldn't tell for sure how tall the person facing the shadow was. How fun! It was not that Sonny became completely unrecognizable, though. He would still have to be careful to hide the context clues about himself while wearing the mask. Mundane things like the way he walked, his usual mannerisms, and other subtle but unique details of his behavior could still betray his identity, despite the fact that it was masked from all unnatural means of detection. To truly make himself appear as something else, Sonny would have to put on a performance. Good thing he was practicing the shadow dance then. Was it not designed to fully imitate someone else's battle style and physicality? What a wonderful coincidence! Finally, the moment he had been dreading came. It was time to test if the simple trick was really capable of turning his flaw upside down. Needless to say, Sonny was nervous. His lips became dry and he unconsciously tried to lick them, but now there was a mask on his face, so he couldn't. That bad habit of his had to be put to rest, apparently. Great, all right, let's do this. Opening his mouth, Sonny said out loud, I am very tall. In the process, he grimaced, expecting the familiar pain to invade his mind. But there was nothing. Sonny froze, blinked a couple of times, and waited. Still, nothing happened. Beneath the mask, a wide grin appeared on his face. I am not only tall but also exquisitely handsome. But that is not all. I am incredibly honest and nice, too. Every girl I meet immediately falls in love with me. Boys, too. That's just how lovable, handsome, nice, and tall I am. Everything I have just said is absolutely true. His mind was peaceful and quiet. There was no pain, no pressure. In fact, Sonny felt great. Wow! Feeling an almost overwhelming desire to continue spouting lies, he laughed in exhilaration. Amazing this can be. But then a tremendous explosion of pain suddenly threw him to the ground. With a startled yelp, Sonny grasped his head and then groaned through gritted teeth, feeling as though it was about to burst. What the hell? He just wanted to say how useful the ability to lie could be. Wait. The ability to lie would, indeed, be very useful, which meant that by stating that fact, he would be telling the truth. And the Weaver's mask did not remove his flaw, just reversed it. So, it seemed like while wearing it, Sonny could not tell even a word of truth. Ugh. That seemed like the right conclusion to make, but he needed to test it to be absolutely sure. With a doomed sigh, Sonny waited for a moment and then said, "My name is—" A moment later, another pained scream resounded in the darkness of the underground chamber. Some time later, Sonny emerged from the ruins of the cathedral with a rucksack on his shoulder, took one last look back, and left. Whatever his future was going to be, he doubted that he would come back here anytime soon. It was a bittersweet goodbye. Cautiously walking through the familiar streets of the dark city, where he knew every turn and every piece of rubble, in this district of it, at least Sonny kept his guard up. Many things must have changed in the months he had been away traveling through the labyrinth. The nightmare creatures he knew, and more importantly, knew how to avoid might have wandered away or perished, and new horrors might have taken their place. He had to stay prudent and careful. But still, his next and final goal was not that far away. As he sneaked toward it, Sonny thought about the Weaver's mask and the ways it could change his life. At first, he thought about simply never taking it off and walking around while delivering a deluge of lies. This way he would be safe from revealing his most guarded secret and becoming someone's slave at least. But after considering this seriously, he came to the conclusion that it was not the best decision in his current circumstances. First of all, one couldn't be a part of any collective while lying all the time. Sonny had an unpleasant experience of being expelled from various groups for various reasons, and not being sincere and honest was one of the surest ways to make people want to avoid you at all cost, eventually, at least. And no one was able to survive alone in the dream realm, not in a way that a person would want to live anyway. Sonny knew a lot about this side of things, too. But most importantly, he was not going to be able to keep this lying for long, anyway, not when dealing with people that already knew him. Kai and Cassie would notice the strange effect of the mask immediately. Kai because of his ability to sense lies, Cassie because her ability to see attributes would suddenly stop working. But others would catch on that something strange was going on with him pretty quickly, too, simply because of how drastic the change in his behavior would be. Especially Nephi's, who knew him so well. After that, they would inevitably have a lot of questions, and answering those questions, even with lies, would put him in more danger than he already was in. So, sadly, Weaver's mask was not a panacea to Sonny's current situation. At best, it would be able to help him avoid certain predicaments if used sparingly. But really, he didn't want anyone to know that he was in possession of that memory at all. Sonny had to think of the future. If he was lucky enough to survive the fall of the bright castle and return to the real world, that was where the black mask could create miracles for him. It would allow him to have a hidden persona that was in no way connected to an awakened named Sunless, and as such, allow him to do and achieve things that would have been impossible or too dangerous to try as himself. To that effect, no one could know that the strange black wooden mask was connected to him, not even people whom he, somewhat, trusted. Both for his own good and theirs. It is such a pity, though. It was. Just imagining Castor's face if he were to ever learn about what type of treasure Sonny had somehow found this time was tempting enough to change his plans. Castor. Sonny's face darkened. He had not forgotten about the promise Nephi's had made him at the start of their journey to the Hollow Mountains. Tomorrow, he was finally going to learn what was the deal with the proud legacy, and what exactly the relationship between Changing Star and him was. And how big were the chances of Sonny having to face Castor in battle? Despite all his dislike for the handsome scion of the Han Li clan, Sonny was reluctant to actually fight him. No matter how much progress he had made to get ready for the bloody conclusion of this disastrous chapter of his life, Castor was still not someone to be taken lightly. He was a tremendously deadly opponent just based on what Sonny knew about him. And there were secrets that the legacy had been keeping, as well. That charm of his, what does it do? He was certain that he would defeat Castor if push came to shove, but the cost he would have to pay for that victory would be heavy, perhaps much more heavy than he was willing to pay. Suddenly uneasy, Sonny silently shook his head and continued on his way. As the sun began to roll toward the western horizon, he approached his goal, the ruins of an ancient library that stood lonesomely among the decimated buildings. Back near the end of his lonely months of hunting monsters on the streets of the Dark City, Sonny had begun exploring this ruin for bits of information about the history of the Forgotten Shore. Because of his chance encounter with the Stone Saint, and then with Kai, which led to him abandoning the ruins for a long expedition into the labyrinth, he had never finished this project. There was this one vast mosaic, in particular, that Sonny was interested in. It sprawled across the entire floor of the library's main hall and was mostly covered by rubble. In the past, Sonny was not strong enough to move the rubble out of the way. He had been hopping to make the Stone Saint do it for him, but sadly, the shadow was currently slumbering in the depths of his shadow core, evolving into whatever it was she was going to turn into. Just to be sure, he checked one more time to see if the mysterious process was still going, and sighed in disappointment. Luckily, he had grown much stronger himself during these months. Sonny was pretty sure that now he would be able to clear the mosaic with his own 2 hands. It was just going to be a lot of work. Sending his shadow into the library to make sure that no abomination had made its nest there during his absence, Sonny entered the cool shadow of the ruin and sighed. Better get started. Soon, the scraping sound of heavy boulders being moved could be heard under the partially collapsed roof of the ancient building. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe and like the video and comment down if anything wrong in the story. And if have any suggestion to a new novel or want next part of any series, comment down. Our target is to get 1K subscriber. There will be surprise for all of you. Stay tuned.